Morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. We do have a few updates this morning. First, wanted to start off just as a reminder, the local administered projects workshop, the LAP workshop, is going to be held in Roanoke, September 17th through 19th. Hopefully, we'll see most of you all there. Also wanted to mention, I know at the last TTAC meeting and at the TPS meeting, we talked about the tip process review that we were working with TPO staff on in central office and trying to find ways to streamline our process and make improvements as necessary. Pavitra and I will be sending out an email later this week with the survey that we mentioned. So we would ask that you please fill out the survey, get that back to us. And I know Mr. Mihaly will be scheduling a meeting with the work group that was established to kind of walk through those details and the results of the survey. So that survey will be going out later this week. And also I wanted to mention, I guess this is a big change since our last TTAC meeting in July. I mentioned that Mr. Stringfield, Eric Stringfield, who's our district planner, was out for an extended period. He has decided to retire, and from our July TTAC meeting to today, he is retired officially. So we will be holding a retirement celebration for him. We're kind of working out the logistics now. It may be virtual. But more to come on that. So just wanted to mention that to you all, that he did decide to retire. We will have something for him at VDOT, and we'll invite you all. As I mentioned in July, Angela Paza is our acting district planner. So again, any questions that you would typically work with Eric, please feel free to reach out to Angela. With that, I know my team has a couple updates.
I just jump in before, I'm sorry. Because of the contributions that Eric has had to TTAC, our region, we want to do a resolution. He is very appreciative and plans to be here in person. So we would have that for the October agenda at the beginning. So he just has to come in. We'll keep you updated, but we thought that'd be the least we could do for all the work that Eric's done for our region.
Good morning. I have a quick update on the State of Good Repair Bridge application cycle. So you should have received a list of eligible bridges from your local contact. If you didn't receive that information, you can reach out to me and I can get that over to you. There's over $103 million available. So we strongly encourage you all to submit applications. It would help us out if you could let us know what you're proposing to submit. We are working with our district structure and bridge office to identify some resources to help with technical support during the application cycle. Right now, we are working to establish a date when the portal will be open. We are thinking the end of September, but it will definitely close December the 6th at 5 p.m. There will also be a local webinar going over the application process, and that will be on September the 26th. We will be sending out details, joining information for that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Sonia, one question. Do we know yet? I assume there's going to be some type of ranking that goes with this or a scoring process.
I believe the list that identifies the eligible projects has some type of priority on there. So I believe that's what they'll be using as far as ranking the applications.
All right, good morning, everyone. I just wanted to remind any of the localities that currently have an update to their comprehensive plan to go ahead and submit to VDOT at least 90 days before adoption so that we also have a chance to review it. So if you have any questions on submissions, which usually go through our residencies, please let us know and we will assist you through that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Report?
Good morning. No update this morning. Thank you. FHWA, DRPT.
No major updates for September, but just kind of following up on that discussion with VDOT, as they are still kind of working through the tip step, we on our side are working through our process as well. I think we'll also have some updates, hopefully in the next couple of months. I know it's taking some time as well, kind of dealing with flex funds. I do want to bring that up because we also are trying to navigate the CRP funds that have now been introduced into the mix. But if you have any progress or in that working group, please loop me in. I would love to kind of hear the discussion on the VDOT side because we're trying to coordinate with the central office as well and kind of getting the step process a little bit more streamlined between our agencies. Thank you.
Okay, and the last one is military. So moving on to item number 7, approval of consent items. Are there any questions about those? If not, I'll take a motion.
Move the approval as presented.
Second. Motion to approve. Any all in favor? Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. Item number 8 is HRTPO Smart Scale Guidebook update.
Yeah, so the TPO staff updated the Smart Scale Guidebook based on recent updates that CTB approved for the process. We presented this at the July meeting, and the guidebook was put out for public comment from July 3rd to the 17th. We didn't receive any comments, so today we are requesting TTAC to recommend TPO board approval at their next meeting.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, if not, this is an action item. Motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, guidebook is. Okay, moving on to item number 9, which is a presentation by Dale, the 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone had a nice, enjoyable long weekend. So we're here today for a feedback request item on the 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan, specifically about identifying regional transportation needs. So as you can see, our vision plan for the 2050 LRTP is Transportation for All, and this was recently approved by the board at their last meeting in July. And then, as most of you are aware, the Long Range Transportation Plan is the bridge between what we envision in terms of transportation and what actually gets identified to be built, in the TIP and eventually open to the public. So the LRTP is the 20-year transportation blueprint. And really, the big takeaway is that all regionally significant projects must be included and identified in a long-range transportation plan before they can proceed towards construction. Another recent approval by the board back in May was our regional scenario planning framework, and these are our greater growth scenarios. Just have a reminder image where we're looking at multiple plausible futures when we're identifying transportation needs for the next 20 years. And that looks at different ways the region can grow. So I've already talked about some of that plan framework that we've had approved and established for the 2050. The baseline forecast was also approved earlier this year. We're working with stakeholders and our consultants to establish those greater growth TAZ allocations as well. Just talked about the vision that was recently approved. And as I stated at the start of this presentation, we're at the point where we're identifying those transportation needs to evaluate for the 2050 LRTP. So before we dive into how we've been collecting projects, not every type of transportation project is listed in a long-range transportation plan. We only identify and list those regionally significant. We intentionally keep that definition vague. So it gives us some flexibility in terms of if a project needs to be in the long-range transportation plan or not. But for us, obviously, if a roadway is going to be adding additional through lanes or it's a new roadway, that needs to be listed in a long-range transportation plan. When it comes to transit, it's really only fixed guideways that we list individually. We do have a set aside for bus route enhancements and bus stop enhancements, but we don't individually list each of those. You would find those in the tip. And then also anything related to the 757 Express, we are identifying those routes. And then with active transportation, regional level bike lanes and trails is what we individually list in an LRTP. So in terms of what we've been doing over the past year and a half in terms of collecting projects, first, in working with the LRTP subcommittee in the past, when we started a new long-range transportation plan, we started from zero and we let stakeholders tell us what they wanted to carry over. What we heard was, since there's so much work put into each LRTP, let's just automatically carry those over, and then you all will tell us what's no longer a priority. So we started with the 2045 long-range transportation plan that includes our rural vision plan and also the regional vision plan for the metropolitan area. We looked at all of our HRTPO studies and any recommendations from our studies that have been conducted over the last 4 to 5 years that are regionally significant. We pulled those out as potential candidate projects. We've also had a public-facing candidate project portal that's been open for a little bit over a year, where the public could submit suggestions to us directly. In July, we had an interactive session with our TPO board, got a ton of great feedback, over 200 project ideas just from that interactive board session. We've also coordinated with the Community Advisory Committee, the Freight Transportation Advisory Committee, and then other community groups. Under what we're doing currently is doing a travel demand model analysis, looking at with our 2050 forecast, if we don't do anything, where are those congestion bottlenecks? We'll add those as candidate projects. And we're also doing some resiliency and equity analysis to make sure any projects in terms of flooding vulnerability or an equity lens, that we're capturing those for candidate projects. So right now, currently, in terms of candidate project ideas, we have a lot, 674. And I have a summary here on this slide of where all those different projects are coming from. So basically what I just told you about, the current long-range transportation plan and the board make up the bulk of where these project ideas have come from, followed by what we directly received from the public, and then those other studies and advisory committees. So one of the first things we have to do is look for LRTP applicability. So of these 674, we could see right off the top that 121 are not things that we need to individually list in a long-range transportation plan. Some of those we will be following up. If there are smaller scope projects for maybe Hampton Roads Transit or WADA or Suffolk Transit, we'll be forwarding those suggestions to you all and to some of the localities as well. We had quite a bit of duplicates. So, that tells us that, there are issues in the region that multiple different stakeholder groups are recognizing. And currently we have just over 300 unique project suggestions that we can analyze for the 2050. So this is just a little bit more insights. This is before we did the LRTP applicability, just to see sort of the nature of the types of projects. Most of them, which is traditional, are roadway type projects. But we did see an increase in transit ideas than we have in previous candidate project submission, as well as more active transportation type projects. After we clean these up for LRTP applicability, I cannot say that word this morning, that graph on the right kind of shows that distribution of roadway type projects, active transportation, transit, again, because we're really only looking at those fixed guideway type projects for the LRTP, and then freight related projects. So we did the same thing for our rule. Again, our rule is more of a vision plan because it's not fiscally constrained. But most of the project ideas for the rural transportation plan are coming from our current 2045 rural plan, and also our TPO studies. Our TPO board had some suggestions for the rural areas, And then in terms of project types for the rural areas, the majority of them are system demand management type projects. These would be projects we would not list in our normal metropolitan long-range transportation plan, but they are applicable in our rural area, followed by roadway and a lot of active transportation ideas as well. So now our feedback request, what we need is for stakeholders to look at these project ideas and confirm that there is support within your locality and agency, that they are compatible and align with your comprehensive plans. And then if there is an additional project that's not yet captured, you will have an opportunity to submit those project ideas as well. TPS staff will continue to review projects for LRTP applicability. And like I mentioned, we still have some analysis that are underway, like the no-build analysis and our resiliency and equity analysis. So Kyle's going to do a quick demonstration of a portal, interactive portal that he set up to help with this review process.
All right, thank you, Dale. Pull it up here. All right, good morning, everyone. I know you all love these interactive maps, so we decided to create another one. This is a live demo, so if anything breaks, don't get mad at me. So this homepage here is just a summary of everything Dale just presented. You can read it at your leisure. I'll have a how-to video posted right after this meeting. Down here at the bottom, we have two different maps, one for the MPA, one for the rural for Franklin and Southampton County. So just to dive in, once you click on one of the portals, you're going to see this spaghetti chaos right here. Don't be afraid. So the easiest and fastest way to do this is this filter tools up here in the top left corner. Most of you are familiar with the layout of these interactive maps from previous apps from different departments. So just an example, if we do Chesapeake, and then looking at active transportation, the map will filter and zoom to each of these candidate projects. You will know over here, this top section is our candidate project points, and the bottom section is our candidate project links. So projects can be either points or links. Here, for this example, it says there are no points available because they are all links. Fastest way to do this is to review all of the listed projects here. So if you just click on one of them, it will zoom to it. And over here on the left-hand column is all the information that we are asking you to review and provide. So the main one is if we are keeping this project for the 2050, a yes or no, so just a drop down. Once you select all your options, you want to click update as in previous apps. We do note here, if you have additional notes or comments, you can provide it here, and please provide your name, who reviewed this and provided the input. If you notice a project alignment needs to be adjusted, you can do that by clicking on this tool here. And this is also where you can add additional candidate projects. If you need to adjust one of the alignments, you could just draw right over it. And then provide the input in this pop-up box here. And always click submit. We have these supporting tools down here in the bottom. So we have a help tool that sort of discusses all of the tools in this interactive map, how-to video, and then the add submission tool. And I'm happy to take any questions. I don't want to go too deep into details on this tool.
Hi, I have a question. Is this for studies as well or only for a full improvement?
So for the long-range transportation plan, typically we don't evaluate a study, but we will evaluate that project that the study is looking at.
Okay.
If you want something studied, you would just tell us what that project is.
Okay. And then all of the projects in 2045 are already pre-populated. So we just have to confirm, or everything would have to go back in?
It's already pre-populated, except for the ones that we knew have been completed. We removed those, or through the process of the 2045, if we heard that there wasn't support, then we would have pulled those as well. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then just a clarification, so on this map is the ones that you checked through. So all that were submitted and the ones that from the public and from the board and from all, this is kind of the final of what's still in there.
Yeah, we say potential candidates, because it is just Kyle and I. We could have overlooked something that probably maybe shouldn't be in here. We're relying on local knowledge if there is something that we receive from the public or another source that the locality or agency is not supportive of. If there is conflict, say a locality is supportive of a transit project, but the transit agency isn't, then we will get everyone together to find some common ground, because we don't want to necessarily dismiss an idea just because one stakeholder may not support it. But yeah, this is the initial, and I'll show in the next few slides, we're going to actually have a final candidate project list that we want the board approved before we start analyzing projects. I'll also add that we're going to offer a virtual demonstration. So we'll be sending out an email. Kyle will also do a recorded how-to video. But we know it's kind of hard to see with these screens, but through the LRTP subcommittee, we'll offer some virtual demonstrations for this portal as well. Any other questions before we proceed?
And Dale, I think it's really important you all put your eyes on this, because when we take it to the board, they kind of look at us and go, are the staff okay with it? So if you have a project, as Dale said, anything that we missed or anything that you are like, it totally does not line up with what we are thinking, please let us know, because we evaluate what goes in. And if a project doesn't get evaluated, it's not going to go through the final list of projects, and that causes more problems to add a project at the end. So really need your input. I think Dale and her team have done an amazing job just shepherding it through so far. So if you have any questions, please reach out. But the September 30th, please keep that in mind. That's very important to keep that in mind for the portal.
And if I boiled down the LRTP to the three most important pieces, which we don't ever want to do because it's very comprehensive and it's very nuanced. But the three most important pieces are: we need to have the project ideas or we cannot evaluate them. So this is an important input item. And then when we need the data to prioritize them, we've got to have those scores so we can rank, and then fiscal constraints. So this is very critical in the LRTP process. So looking ahead, this would be the steps. We're collecting those ideas. We're basically on step 2, where we're working with you all to make sure that any ideas that we have, all the ideas, and that ideas that we have are consistent with growth plans. This review process is not the only time. We will come back. For those that have been through the prioritization process, know that you will get this monster spreadsheet from us that's asking for lots and lots of data. That's that second most important piece in the LRTP process. So that's going to be coming up in the next few months. Then staff is going to evaluate and prioritize all the candidate projects, which could be, probably around 300, maybe even 400 or 500 projects for staff to analyze over the next 6 to 9 months. And then towards the end of the year, doing fiscal, end of next year. Sorry, panicked for a second. Fiscal constraint. And then just high level, we'll get into this in more detail, in the coming months. But in terms of the prioritization process, it's a very robust, data-driven process. We evaluate candidate projects by their project categories. That's why in the portal, you'll see that we're starting to segment out projects by roadway, active transportation, transit, freight, et cetera. And then we have 3 main scoring components: project utility, economic vitality, and project viability. And each of these has lots and lots of measures. All of this requires lots of data. So, we will be following up any candidate project you guys give us. Just in the back of your mind, we're going to be asking for lots of data. So don't submit more projects than you're willing to give us data for, because we really do need lots and lots of data to analyze all these projects. So the ask is to take a look at the portal. Again, we'll do some virtual. We'll get that email out either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. But we do need the feedback by the end of the month so we can keep the 2050 LRTP on track. So be happy to take any other questions anyone may have.
Any other questions for Dale? And I won't speak for everybody, but I love the portals. It's so easy.
Thank you for pulling that together.
Yeah, we appreciate Kyle is amazing at that. So we're just trying to have, more interactive, engaging tools for you all to give us feedbacks.
Okay, so moving on to item number 10, which is a presentation on State Trails Office overview and current status. And Todd Hallis, you want to introduce our speaker?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. So with us virtually, we have Mr. Jacob Helmbolt. He's out of the State Trails Office. He's the State Trails Administrator. So he's out of Central Office, State Trails. He's going to give you an update on the current status of the Trails Office and some of the information that they have going on, different plans and things they have in the works. And so I'll turn it over to Jacob. Hopefully he can hear us okay.
Yep, thank you. We're having a little bit of audio difficulties. Are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. Do you want me to turn over my screen so I can put that presentation up? Let me see. Let me make sure I can share this. And let me see here. Are you see? Yeah, it looks like I can see on the background there. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity, Todd, to give everyone just kind of a quick overview of what's happening with State Trails Office. Just kind of a quick update. Basically, again, my name's Jacob Helmbolt. I'm the State Trails Administrator here in TMPD. I was in TMPD 15 years ago, so I'm kind of back home, if you will. Cassie Patterson is the State Trails Program Coordinator. I don't believe she's on today's meeting because she just got back from Banff in Canada yesterday, so she's probably a little bit jet lagged. She's in Local Assistance Division, and also in LAD is the State Trails Program Manager. Unfortunately, that position is vacant, has been vacant for right at a month. Torsha Bhattacharya, some of you may have known her, left to go to the Fairfax County Parks Authority. So LAD is.
Would you be able to swap your display? We're seeing can you get into the presenter mode because we're seeing two slides right now.
I'm sorry, the
Yes.
the audio is really kind of garbled.
Jacob, just give us 1 minute. We'll send you a text.
Let me. Looks like you're getting my other screen.
That's it. You got it. Thank you.
Is that showing up now proper way?
Yes, it is. It looks good.
Okay. Sorry about that. So again, we're in the midst of trying to fill that position, or I should say local assistance is, since that is housed upstairs. For those of you that aren't familiar with the STO, that's how we kind of refer to the State Trails Office since it's less of a mouthful. It was created by action of the General Assembly. The state budget from June 22 called for planning, development, and construction of multi-use trails throughout the Commonwealth prioritizing new regional trails, providing for connectivity of existing trail networks and building out those networks, and also focusing on geographic diversity in the use of those various funds. And it also established the State Trails Office itself, housed again here in VDOT. And it was tasked specifically with coordinating with DCR, since they have their recreational focused trails within their state parks and also their State Trails Advisory Committee. As I mentioned, it's split here between local assistance and TMPD, with TMPD focusing on kind of the planning aspects and local assistance, dealing with more of kind of the grants and some of the financial issues that are still kind of evolving. There isn't dedicated funding from the office. Currently, there are 5 statewide trails of statewide significance that were funded, but at this point, the office isn't administering dollars. But of course, LAD administers the TAP program, so there's some overlap up there with their staff. Prior to Cassie and me joining, we both started here in the office back in March of this year. So prior to us getting here, the team with Torsia and at the time Wood Hudson and a couple others kind of filling in started the State Trails Plan. And phase 1 is basically complete. It's on the governor's desk for review. It's gone up through the secretary's office. That really focused on some public outreach, looking at existing and planned trail networks throughout the state, having some surveys, some focus groups, virtual town halls to get feedback on how trails are used by folks, what are some of the barriers to actually using them, and kind of what people would like to see in the build out of kind of a network of statewide trails. And that kind of informed how we can go about putting together a plan that really focuses on enhanced transportation, recreational opportunities, how trails factor into economic development opportunities, improving health outcomes, environmental sustainability, quality of life, all those kind of typical things. And again, it was conducted public engagement through surveys, virtual town halls, and those focus groups with some of the key stakeholders throughout the state. As I mentioned, it's on the governor's desk for phase 1. It took inventory of statewide trails, getting those from DCR, MPOs, PDCs, local jurisdictions, trying to aggregate all of that, putting together is to the best degree possible, kind of consistent attribute data, identifying those high-level needs and basing some of that analysis on what we heard from the public engagement side of things. And another aspect of this initiative is development of a resource hub for statewide trails. And that actually is something that we would actually like to hear some feedback on, because the notion of a resource hub is not fully fleshed out. The intent was to have it be, initially it was referred to as a clearinghouse, but basically it's resources, especially for professionals, planners, designers, also for stakeholders that are trying to advance projects. It's not intended to be kind of it would be public facing, but it's not intended to be kind of a, hey, where's a trail that I can go use necessarily. There are apps for that, but more it's a matter of resources and tools and best practices, those types of things that we can make available. So we're trying to solicit feedback from people in terms of what would be of greatest utility to be in that. Some of the analysis that went into this phase 1 component was looking at population, employment centers, figuring out where underserved communities are, looking at the PSAP, Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, safety priority corridors, and that is now the PBSAP, incorporating the bicycle elements into that going forward. So essentially looking at where those corridors that have safety issues that might be better served with dedicated off-roadway infrastructure, and also looking at those corridors that potentially serve as barriers to good, facilities that cross something. A huge arterial can be as much of a barrier as something like a river. So again, it's on the governor's desk. Hopefully that will be released so we can allow people to review that and see that. While that is being reviewed, we've started with phase 2, which is really heavily aimed at analysis of that existing and planned network. It's not going to be going through the public engagement process since it's really aimed at the spatial analysis, defining kind of this definition of regionally connected, which came out of phase 1. That was kind of a notion that didn't have a specific definition, but really trying to figure out what defines these planned trails that would serve either regional connections, say, across jurisdictional lines, or that are substantial enough that it provides connection to a network that then provides, kind of a more regionally connected network. We're looking at kind of urban, suburban, and rural typologies so that we can not, or we can avoid skewing kind of the analysis towards, say, urban. If you're looking at population density, employment density, those types of things, you can easily skew, the value of what you're looking at as far as planned trails towards one area. So, of course, suburban is an arbitrary definition. We're kind of looking at how we define some of that as far as population density. Urban and suburban get very kind of muddy, since suburban is really a subset of suburban is a subset of urban. But also in terms of the rural typologies, looking at, say, trails that are planned that serve smaller towns, but that are also in rural areas, making sure that they're not getting short shrift. What we're trying to do with this is provide a tiering of these different planned facilities. It's not a ranking or a prioritization per se, so much as coming up with those attributes of what makes kind of for good trails, those that can serve transportation purposes, those that would typically see, higher use, if you will, that provide utility, and trying to figure out ways to identify those attributes that we have spatial data for that can be analyzed and then put into kind of tiers of, say, primary, secondary, tertiary, if you will, and also breaking them out into those contextual areas. So that way we have some lists of projects throughout the state that might be able to be advanced and receive a little bit more attention. We're also putting together aggregation of different funding opportunities that kind of factors into that resource hub component, so that people understand what funding opportunities are out there, what kind of eligibility criteria there are. Obviously, some more recreational trails may not necessarily qualify for the more transportation specific kind of funding, so that people aren't kind of going down, a dead end, if you will, trying to get funding for a project that they're trying to pursue something that's not going to necessarily be competitive for a particular pot of funding. Cassie up in LAD is also working on a story map that will be online. So that will basically have a statewide map of, all of this planned and existing multi-use trails, but also it will have a narrative format that's concise and consolidated, that lays out this whole process, so that someone doesn't necessarily have to look through an entire long document if they want to kind of see how all of this has developed and continues to move forward. So just a couple quick images here. The phase 2 is looking at things like physical barriers. How do we provide connections to existing multimodal networks? Again, aggregating those funding resources so that people can understand what is out there and eligibility. One thing we're also working on, LAD is coordinating right now with a consultant to come up with standards and guidelines for development of different trails. You know, when you talk about a trail to different people, and it elicits different kind of concepts or notions of what a trail is to that individual. You know, everything from rustic hiking trails such as the Appalachian Trail, single track mountain bike trails on up to 12-foot wide shared use path in an urban area. So, and everything in between. So, putting together some more robust standards and guidelines. One of the other issues is having more tools in the toolbox, if you will, for contextually appropriate trails, since that is a bit nebulous. You know, within the RDM, there's 10-foot shared use path, your typical AASHTO guidelines. And there's a desire to have a little more variability in terms of what can be built to serve different needs. And like I said, that story map that is being developed to kind of contextualize all of this and lay it out in a concise format. As I mentioned, the resource hub is still being kind of fleshed out. It's going to look to map all trails, which of course is a big, heavy lift. We want to focus on kind of shared use paths, and other, hard surface trails, whether that's a crushed compacted stone, say something like High Bridge Trail, but essentially those that have a hardened surface of some type that is multi-use, that is accessible for people with mobility issues, and then building out some of the other trails statewide so that we can have as robust inventory of everything. And again, figuring out what kind of resources are going to be most useful for stakeholders, planners, designers, etc. The intent is to have this phase 2 wrapped up, both the analysis and this resource hub, by the end of this calendar year. So December, again, that's pretty ambitious, especially with Torsia now having left. Whoever replaces her is going to be focusing heavily on that, overseeing the development of that design guidelines document, while our consultant, Kimberly Horn, and their sub-tool design group are working on this resource hub and the phase 2 analysis. And I think that, well, what's going on? Oops, sorry. I was a little bit slow there. So just some examples of what the trails network looks like. It's a bit of a plate of spaghetti when you're zoomed out to the whole state. The blue is existing, the red are the planned trails, and looking at trying to build that out. And the attributes that we're kind of looking at in that resource hub, everything from the trail, the name, the service type, the width, all those kinds of things. Locality name, ownership, and maintenance, that's become a big thing because oftentimes that's a bit ambiguous. We've got a recent issue here, I think up in Nova, where there's the question of, well, who's supposed to be maintaining this particular shared use path, and no one is quite sure. So wanting to make sure that we have those kinds of issues accounted for so that that ambiguity doesn't exist and that those things don't fall through the cracks. Again, I mentioned the kind of the trail design issue. One of the reasons this came up is there's kind of this notion of, well, we're spending a lot of money on things that may not necessarily be the most appropriate for a given context or to serve a kind of the intended user or the volume of use kind of thing. So one thing that we need to do with this is disambiguate trails, since that's not a technical term. Like I mentioned before, the term trail can be a shared use path, a greenway along a kind of a riparian corridor, rails to trails, or rails with trails, such as the Shenandoah Valley Rail Trail that is being fleshed out. Again, some people think of single track and hiking trails, nature trails. So kind of putting together some contextual guidelines so that when people are talking about this issue, people are on the same page. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. We have our website on the VDOT page. Again, Cassie Patterson and I are the two staff on board at this time. There's a general email, State Trails Office at vdot.virginia.gov should anyone want to reach out. That's monitored by several people here. So with that, happy to entertain any questions that people might have.
Thank you, Jacob, for the presentation. Anybody have any questions?
I do. Jacob, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, so a couple of questions. When do you think phase 2 is going to be wrapped up?
I'm not able to hear whoever is speaking. It's very broken up.
When would phase 2 be wrapped up?
When is phase 2 going to be wrapped up? Was that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, so the intent is for phase 2 to be finished by the end of this calendar year. So end of December, hopefully. That's the intent. Again, you know, since we're down one person in the staff of 3, got a lot to try to get done in that short time.
So if our localities, they're doing a lot in trail planning, what is the best thing they can do so our trails also get the attention as future funds are distributed?
The question, as far as was that funding being distributed for local trails?
Yeah, you said you are not, there were 5 trails across the state that have some funding, but you're not distributing funding. Because there are a lot of existing and planned trails in our region, what can we do best as a region to position our trails?
Yeah, so the STO is not administering funds. Like I mentioned, there were 5 trails of statewide significance that got funding, large amounts of funding from the General Assembly throughout the state, including the Eastern Shore Rail Trail being one of those 5. As far as local trails, you know, a lot of times everyone looks to TAP, Transportation Alternative Program funds, as kind of the one source of funding for local trails. That, of course, is very limited. It doesn't go very far when you're talking about, say, separate paved shared use path, especially with current costs. You know, that we've all seen the ridiculous escalation in costs here in the last 4 years in the age of COVID. You know, one of the big things that we're going through with this analysis is, you know, finding these trails that look like they have the greatest utility, greatest benefit as far as serving to build out a network. Again, we don't have money to be able to say, hey, we're going to give, you know, $5 million to Project X down in, you know, Hampton Roads or whatever district. But what that hopefully will allow us to do is then coordinate with localities and districts to say, hey, these look like they're the ones that have really good potential. How can we incorporate these into, you know, whether it's, say, a smart scale application or, you know, other projects that may not simply be a standalone project. Oftentimes, you know, so I've spent the last 13 years at the city of Richmond, and so one of the big things that we tried to do was kind of mainstream projects. In other words, incorporate stuff with other bigger roadway construction projects or repaving or things like that. So it's a matter of you know, finding different ways to advance projects, whether it's part of another bigger project, whether it's standalone. One of the things that we want to also try to do with this, once we have kind of this list of you know, tiered projects, buckets, as some folks have referred to them as, is then start reaching back to districts, PDCs, localities, and say which of these actually are somewhat, at least somewhat ready to move forward. You know, we can have a line on a map, but we don't know whether or not there's right of way for it, whether any PE has been done, how ready for prime time is it, if you will, and try to work with localities and the districts to line up those projects that have the greatest likelihood of being able to move forward. So given that we don't have money to allocate, I think it's more a matter of working collaboratively to identify those projects and then try to find ways to get them funded.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I just have one, Jacob, when you came up with your list and the map, you mentioned that you worked with PDCs. So the HRTPO active transportation plan, I guess that was a resource for developing your map?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the full question.
When you were developing your map of proposed state or regional trails, did you use the HRTPO active transportation plan as a resource?
Yes, so all of those planned and existing trails were sourced from whatever we could get from PDCs, MPOs, localities, whatever was out there. There was a wide call for data. When that first outreach was conducted with the state trails plan last year. There we know certainly there are going to be, gaps in the data. And obviously the data that we're working from was from a year ago. We know that some of that stuff has, say, moved forward. It's gone from, planned to either in construction or constructed in a couple of instances. And there may be some data that we did not get. So it'll be kind of an iterative approach. David Cook here in TMPD also is tasked with, or TMPD is tasked with updating the GIS records of all of the stuff that is built. But again, if it's planned, but we weren't able to receive that from a source, it may be missed.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to item number 11, we have a presentation on the Suffolk Seaboard Coastline Trail Update with Christy and Daryl.
As they make their way to the podium, we requested Suffolk to brief TTAC because they made great progress on this trail. And I know other parts like Virginia Beach, they got the huge funding from RACE. So if you have any projects that you would like, the region to know, please let us know so we could have you at TTAC. I think there's a lot of great stories in our transportation. So it'd be good if you could share that information with us.
Good morning. Thank you for having us today. We're excited to share with you our strategy for funding and building the Suffolk Seaboard Coastline Trail. Our team today is me, Christy Fisher. I am a landscape architect and planner for the city of Suffolk. I've worked with several of you at the city of Norfolk or the city of Virginia Beach. So excited to see some familiar faces. This is Daryl Lewis.
Good morning.
Daryl's the Assistant Director of Public Works with the City of Suffolk, and he's an engineer, used to work with VDOT. So he's our local expert when it comes to the Smart Scale and TA grants. And thanks again for having us. So the Suffolk Seaboard Coastline Trail is a rail-to-trail project that's named after the two rail companies that formerly operated on the land, the Atlantic Coastline Railroad and the Seaboard Airline. The original master plan, which was developed in 2006, extends from downtown Suffolk to the Suffolk City and Chesapeake City line. 15 years ago, I worked for the city of Virginia Beach, and I remember going to payback meetings, and Helen Gabriel, who I know several of you know, would show up with all this progress she'd made on the Suffolk's portion of the Southampton Roads Trail. And I was just like, how is Suffolk doing all of this? So hopefully Daryl and I can provide a little insight into how we have funded the trail that goes from downtown to the Chesapeake City line. It's part of the Southampton Roads Trail, the 41-mile-long trail that goes from Suffolk to Virginia Beach oceanfront. Our portion of the trail is 10-foot wide, multi-use. It will be 19 miles in length. I stole this graphic from the city of Virginia Beach. Hope you don't mind. But it's a great map that shows the regional trail system and how we all fit into it. The Suffolk Seaboard Coastline Trail is part of the Southampton Roads Trail, the East Coast Greenway, the Beaches to Bluegrass Trail, and it connects to the Trail 757, which is now, which was formerly called the Birthplace of America Trail. I'm going to give an overview of the segments, and Daryl's going to get into the details of how we funded each section. So initially, to get buy-in into the project from the beginning, having our master plan, 2 segments were funded internally. The Constance Road to Seaboard Station Railway Museum, which is downtown, was part of a 16-inch water main project. So we were able to get that section built as part of a larger project. And then the other section that's downtown, the Prentice Street Trail, was part of a road improvement project. The master plan back from 2006 talks, I thought I went ahead, sorry. The master plan divides the trail into 4 sections that are called 1, 2, 3, 4. And thinking that they would be funded according to number 1, 2, first, second, third, and fourth. It didn't work out that way. Instead, we went with low-hanging fruit. And Daryl will get into more details in how that was that came about.
Okay, good morning again. So this is a pictorial view of our Suffolk Seaboard Coastline Trail. And just for reference, if you look to the upper right corner, the yellow section, that is the city of Chesapeake. And then the bottom yellow section on the map is downtown Suffolk. Now you'll see a red section that next to that, that isn't a part of the original Seaboard Coastline Trail. It's a new segment, and we'll talk about that later on in the presentation. All right. As was stated by Christy, this is a rail-to-trail project, formerly on the Seaboard Coastline Railroad. And there were 4 original segments, as was stated. We can go through them. The first segment is that lower green segment. That is the Moore Avenue to Suburban Drive segment. And then following that is the yellow section on the map, which is our Suburban Drive to Nasman Parkway, followed by the green, the red, and the green. That is segment 3, and that takes us to Driver. And then finally, the yellow at the top is the final segment, the Driver to City of Chesapeake. Now, as you can see, if you were to draw a line, if you see the 2 green segments between the red, that is approximately the alignment of the abandoned rail line.
Sorry, I thought it was the laser pointer.
Okay. So the segment 3 ended up being divided up into 3 segments. We had some challenges with that red segment, which is our segment 3C. In particular, the alignment on which the trail goes on, the abandoned line, actually crosses the live line which the Commonwealth Rail Line occupies. So with that, obviously that would present challenges of coordination with the railroad and getting over the railroad. In addition to that, that crossing that happens between the abandoned line and the live line happens at a marshalling area. And there are 3 tracks. So if you can imagine, that's even more challenging, getting over 3 tracks building some type of bridge over that. And then in addition, we have some minor utility conflicts there. So as a result, the segment 3C, which is the red on the map, had to be realigned, and it actually goes along our Nazareth Parkway roadway. Ironically, it does come back and has to cross the live rail line that Commonwealth occupies. But fortunately, we have a CIP project that's currently in development, scheduled to be open next summer. It's called the Wilroy Overpass, and it actually provides a bridge over the railroad. And there is an alignment on that bridge that accommodates the Seaboard Trail to get it over the railroad. Now I want to talk to you about funding for our trails. Ideally, as you probably just heard in the previous presentation, the transportation alternatives is a great source of funding for trails, and particularly for us. 4 of our 6 trails did use the transportation alternatives funding. And by definition, TA supports non-motorized modes of transportation, and especially off-road trails that support pedestrians and bikes. There's also a statement in there that says that it supports conversions of abandoned rail corridors to trails, which this is. We also use Smart Scale. Smart Scale also supports bike and ped pedestrians, improvements. With the Smart Scale, there's the benefit cost ratio that it uses. And with all of our trails, they were relatively priced. All of them were under 5 million except for that segment 3C, the red on the map. So with that, we always got good scores. Now I'll give some, and we use 2 of our projects to do Smart Scale to get funding. I guess if I were to give some pros and cons of that, but the TA, it does require a 20% match. One good thing about it is you usually receive the money that you apply for in the next fiscal year. Smart Scale, on the other hand, does provide 100% funding. You, however, have to wait about 4 years before funding will hit your project. With that 4-year gap kind of gave us time to work out a couple of the challenges that we had on a couple of our legs. So we know we had funding, we just had more time to work through that. Now, going back to that red segment, segment 3C, which is our longest segment of the trail, we applied for transportation alternatives funding last year, and we were awarded that $2.5 million. And it also happened during a time when the TA program kind of went through a change in how they funded projects. The change was you're only allowed one lifetime maximum allocation of $2.5 million on your project. So that was all you're going to essentially get. So with that, this trail cost us $8.4 million. So that left us with a gap of about $5.3 million. So our strategy was to first, we wanted to look into some of these new programs that were created with the infrastructure bill, in particular RAISE. So strategy was to apply for RAISE. If that didn't work out, then we'd go back to Smart Scale. So we applied for RAISE, and we got it. So we applied, with RAISE, you can apply for either a planning type project or a capital project, and ours was a capital project. There is a match associated with RAISE unless there are 3 stipulations. If your project falls in a historically disadvantaged community, or if it's in an area of persistent poverty, or if it's in a rural area, you can forego paying that match. So our project did qualify as it's in a rural area. Now, just want to give some things that I discovered, or we discovered. We just had a kickoff meeting for the RAISE, and just some things that we learned that we weren't aware of. So first thing, To get an agreement for raise, it takes approximately 12 months, a whole year. And in addition to that, nothing can happen until you get that agreement. Now, for us, we have an existing project, TA, with money, and we're on the clock. We've got money authorization and everything, and we're still being told that we have to halt. We can't proceed. So we're working through that challenge because there's a time period in which we have to spend the TA money. So we're working through that process with VDOT and FHWA. FHWA to try to work through that to see if we can proceed with that portion, and then once we get the agreement, apply the money to the later the construction phase. Another thing that's interesting, so we're in an election year, and I guess the current administration are the authors of this bill that allowed us to have a raise, and should the other party win, there is the possibility that maybe all of this goes away. We don't know. So we're rushing to try to make sure we get this project together and get this agreement in place and get everything authorized so that if that were to happen, we'd be okay. Then lastly, I want to talk to you about right now, if you look at the map again, the 3 green segments, those 3 projects are currently all in design. So we have 3 trails that we're currently designing, expected to be operational, I believe, in June of 27. We worked out something with VDOT where we were able to bundle all 3 projects. They'll have the same schedule, and we'll advertise them as one project. Obviously, as far as billing, we'll separate those out, but they'll all go to construction at the same time. And with that, I'll yield to you to continue.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm just going to go over, Daryl did a great job getting into the details of the projects. I'm just going to go through each segment briefly. This is segment 4, which is in Driver. It starts in the village of Driver and goes to the Chesapeake City line. It's an extremely popular trail. It's so popular that we built an outdoor fitness park that was partially funded by an OBC Healthcare grant. So that's next to the trail. Section 2 is complete. We unofficially call it the suburban section because it is off of one of our roadways called Suburban Drive. This was funded by Transportation Alternatives. You can see how much it was. You can see these 2 trails, they weren't really that much money compared to like as far as cost goes for a trail. So these were the low-hanging fruit, kind of straight away used abandoned rail line. 3B, this is one of the sections Daryl was just talking about that's in design right now. So completion expected in June of 2027. We do have, our trail also goes by several schools at this time. Suffolk school board leadership doesn't want to have like a safe routes to school program, but in the future, if they do, it would be a great way for kids to go to school. It goes by several elementary schools, a high school. Segment 3A, this is another one of the sections. You can see they keep getting more expensive. Again, this is part of the bundle that he was talking about. This was supposed to be our very first section, section 1, but it was too complicated to build first. So the strategy of the people that came before us, like Helen and others, their strategy was to fund the cheapest sections and to show people, hey, look how popular this is. And now that we've shown how popular the trails are, there's buy-in, and we can fund sections that are much more expensive, that are twice as expensive. This section connects downtown to the suburban trail, and it goes across Portsmouth Boulevard. And this is the $8.4 million segment that Daryl was talking about. It's so expensive because we have to acquire so much right-of-way, and we do have to build like a bridge over certain areas, a elevated walkway in certain areas. But that was kind of the missing link, and I think that's what got us the RAISE grant, is we had everything else funded, and then this expensive little piece in the middle that was just waiting for someone to give us money. So future projects, Seaboard West, this was an add-on that goes from the Prentice Street Trail out to Kenyon Road out west in Suffolk. Connecting to the Birthplace of America Trail, we're actually not doing that out west. I'll go back to the map and show you that. Isle of Wight County is already working on their portion to connect to Suffolk. And we are working with the city of Chesapeake, hello Chesapeake, on a FLAP grant to do a feasibility study to connect Chesapeake and Suffolk through the Great Dismal Swamp. And I'll just show you real quick, here, we actually plan to connect to Isle of Wight going up this way. Not this way. So anyway, a lot of people have that question. So, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Christy and Daryl. Does anybody have any questions?
I've got just a couple more observations I'll throw in there that's kind of relevant to this. So over 40 years ago, our city council elected to buy that abandoned rail right-of-way line. Didn't really know exactly what they were going to do with it at the time. There's been a lot of things that's been talked about, using a utility corridor, maybe a connecting roadway, certainly trails. All those things came in. But again, the city invested in it years ago, and that's been a great asset because we own and control the right-of-way. So many times when you're trying to do these trails, you got a vision for somebody else's property and you got to try to acquire it. So that's been a great win for us, the fact that we own that. With that said, and they kind of touched on that in the presentation, anytime you get near an active railway, hang on, because you're going to have a ride. This trail actually crosses active railways a couple of times. One's at grade. Again, we solved that by going around a bridge project we're already building. But one's actually grade separated. There was already bridges in place. They're like, okay, that should be simple. Oh no, nothing simple with the railroad. In fact, that was one of the segments that's kind of languished to the end, trying to get through all of that, making sure that the pedestrians can go through and nothing falls off the train and they can't impact the train that's 30 feet in the air above them, you know, all that kind of good stuff. So it's a lot to be said for that. I will tell you, one of the things I've been working with almost my entire career. One of the things we did is we never said no. You start down this trail and you always hit obstacles. And we'd okay, well, that's a dead end. Where's the alternate route? And again, we've looked at every funding source known to us to do these types of things. We've leveraged a little bit of city money in there. But the most important thing, and Christy kind of touched on that, we built that segment up in northern Suffolk that connects to Chesapeake. We were amazed. People love those types of trails. That place is packed every day of the week. Sometimes it looks like it's pouring down rain. There's still people out there riding bicycles. That's part of what really kicked this off, is the public buy-in. And so often when you first start, the public does not always see the buy-in. In some of these segments of the trail, there's been some discussion in the community. Well, we're not sure we want this because we think it'll bring undesirables into our community. But then once it gets built, they're like, oh gosh, we love this. When can we get the next segment done? When can we get the next segment done? So there's a lot of good lessons to learn in here. Again, we're happy to share with anybody in the region that we can help with you. Christy talked about the Peace going west. Actually, that's just to continue west, maybe towards Southampton County eventually. And again, what used to be Birthplace of America Trail comes out of Isle of Wight County. We're getting ready to do some work on that corridor on Godwin Boulevard, and we're already trying to figure out how we're going to incorporate that in. So that's also been a very helpful piece, is anytime we had a road project that fell in adjacent corridors to make sure we combine those assets in and we leveraged every dollar we could. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Just had a question. The FLAP grant, is that something you're going to apply for, or you're just, I guess Chesapeake's answering that. so-
Well, yes, it's Chesapeake is running the grant. It's just a feasibility study
Okay.
grant, just to basically, where's the line that can connect them? Kevin, did you have any more information about that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Troy's not here to answer some of these questions, so I'll take it. So yes, we're looking at some opportunities to kind of cross. We've had a lot of public comment, I think, both from the Suffolk and Chesapeake side about limited east-west connection through the Dismal Swamp Trail. So that's something that we're currently working on with Suffolk to kind of get a scope and a feasibility on where is an appropriate route, looking at some of the raised area next to the current ditches, kind of in that northern section in our, the Deep Creek section of the city of Chesapeake, and providing better opportunities for both Chesapeake and Suffolk residents to improve access to the asset that is the Dismal Swamp that kind of, I think serves as a really great resource for the entire region. So it's certainly something that we're continuing to work on, and hopefully we'll have some progress made within the next year or so.
Great, yeah. And if I can just mention regarding the boat trail or the Trail 757 or whatever we're calling it at the moment. Just when it comes to, discussing both the right-of-way issues, which we have to look at our property owner rights and respect our landowners in our locality too, and also the concept of leveraging funding. One of the things that becomes very important is having the local planning involved as well, because one of the things that we have in place is a master bike and pedestrian plan. So as land is developed, those bike and pedestrian master plans, they're putting it in their frontage. It's part of our setbacks in our zoning ordinance. It's part of what becomes in their development plans. So when we have subdivisions come in, they're installing it in their frontage, and we're connecting to it as we go along. So our major subdivisions on our Route 10 corridor or in other locations in the county are building their part of it, and we're connecting as we go down the corridor. And it's an expectation, even for smaller, single lot developments, if they don't put it in themselves, then there's the expectation when they redevelop their lot that they need to leave the right of way or the frontage there so that we can put it in the future. So that makes a big difference going along there too. And you need to have it in your plan, so there's that expectation when people are developing their land moving forward, so that you don't have those battles over it as you go forward. Great point. Thank you so much for sharing.
Going on to item number 12, Regional Performance Measures, System Performance Report 2024 update. I believe Keith is.
Thank you and good morning. Today I'll be making a brief presentation on the annual system performance report that we prepare each year as part of our regional performance measures and targets effort. As a reminder, as MPOs, we need to monitor a set of federally established performance measures, and we also need to set targets for each of these different areas. So you can see them listed on the right. Some of the targets are annual for the areas of roadway safety and transit. And then there's ones that we set every 4 years based on pavement condition, bridge condition, roadway performance, and freight. We are a air quality attainment area, so we do not need to do the CMAQ targets that you see at the bottom of the table there. So as part of this, we do prepare a system performance report annually, where we go over all of these regional performance measures and targets and some of the how we're doing compared to the targets that we've set. So in terms of an outline, I just figured I'd show you an example from the report from the pavement condition section to show you what we include in the report. So at the beginning of each section, we go over what the individual measures are. So for pavement condition, it's the condition in good and poor for both the interstate and the non-interstate national highway system. Then we go over the methodology. So how are the measures calculated? How do the feds want you to determine how you are accomplishing those targets? Next, we go over the current and historical conditions. So for pavement condition, we look both in Hampton Roads and in the state of Virginia for good, fair, and poor pavement condition on this example. Then we go over the statewide targets, how they were established, and then we get into the regional targets. So did we match the statewide targets or did we go our own way? If we went our own way, what was the reason for doing that? We lay all that out in the report and then ultimately list what the 4-year targets here for pavement condition in this example are there. And then ultimately at the end of each section, we go over how we are doing relative to those targets and whether we are meeting the target or whether we are not. Unfortunately for pavement condition and all 4 of those measures, we are meeting those targets. So now I'll go over briefly each of the areas individually and how we're doing relative to the targets. So starting with roadway safety, if you've heard me talk here before, every time I mention roadway safety, it's usually bad news. So no surprise there that we are not meeting any of our targets when it comes to roadway safety, whether it's fatalities, fatality rate, serious injuries, the rate of serious injuries, or active transportation crashes. So, and we're not even close to meeting our targets. I mean, we're way above, no matter what target you look at, we're well above what we've set, unfortunately. Transit asset management, where we're looking at the condition of various aspects of our transit systems. It's a little bit of a mixed bag. If you look at the condition of our buses, cutaway buses and ferries, we are not meeting the targets in terms of useful life benchmarks, unfortunately. Other types of assets like light rail vehicles, trolleys, vans, things like that, we are meeting the targets. And then you can see the others there for non-revenue vehicles, for facilities and passenger facilities and for infrastructure. So like I said, it's a mixed bag when it comes to transit asset management. The next one we need to look at is transit safety, and that's also largely good news except for demand response. So when you're looking at injuries, fatalities on our transit system, when you're looking at safety events and reliability, for the most part, we are surpassing our targets except for demand response, where I think we're missing almost every single one. Moving on to some of the 4-year targets, looking at bridge and pavement condition, it's mostly good news. As I mentioned, we're meeting all of our pavement condition targets. Bridge condition, we are meeting them for those bridges in good condition, but we are just barely missing when it comes to poor condition. So for an interim target, we wanted less than 4.2% of our bridges, NHS bridges, to be in poor condition. We're at 4.3% right now, so even though we're missing that target, it's just barely missing. Looking at roadway performance and freight, those 3 measures, we are meeting our targets when it comes to the non-interstate travel time reliability targets and for our truck travel time reliability targets. In terms of the interstate system, same thing. We're missing, but barely. We were aiming for an interim target greater than 92.2%. We're at 92.0. So once again, pretty close, but just barely missing the target. So just providing a summary of what I just mentioned, pavement condition and bridge condition are mostly good, surpassing the targets, as well as most of our reliability targets. Where we're really missing our targets is safety. Anything related to safety, we're badly missing our targets. And then, as I mentioned, barely missing when it comes to bridge condition, poor bridge condition, and the interstate travel time reliability. So, as I mentioned, all of that information is included in the system performance report. The draft version was included with your TTAC agenda today. Public review and comment will open today and be open through September 20th. And we will be back before you at the October meeting asking for a recommended approval of the final document. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Keith. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Item number 13 is a 3-month tentative schedule. October looks pretty packed. In December, we typically don't have a meeting. And then for your information, there's a couple meeting minutes and reports in there you might be interested in. Under announcements, John has one.
Yeah, I think we have a couple items here. So under agenda item 15D, you see listed here, it's a call for LRTP and TIP amendments for October's regional conformity assessment. So if you have any upcoming TIP amendment requests that involve a project that could trigger transportation conformity, We'd like to know that and reach out to us with your request letters by September 13. If you're unsure if any upcoming amendments would trigger conformity for our regional conformity assessment, please contact either Dale Stith if it's LRTP related, or myself and Kathleen Grabiger if it's a TIP related item. So just once again, mark your calendars for September 13th if you have any of those. And once again, if you're unsure, just please contact us and let us know, and we can help you navigate that. Secondly, this spring we allocated, the HRTPO board allocated funds under the CRP program. We still need to get these projects that receive CRP funding in our TIP. So we mentioned this date previously, but just mark your calendars. If you have any of those projects that we need to get your request letter or your amendment request letter in by September 13. So if you can mark those 2 dates down so we don't lose track of those, so we can keep these projects moving, that'd be great. Thanks.
John. Any other announcements?
Just want to give a really quick update on the functional classification update effort. First of all, thank you to all of you that provided your comments over the last month or so on the functional class update. In the next couple days, I'll be sending the final list or draft final list, if you want to call it that, to everybody. And then we're going to open it up for a 2-week public review period. And hope we'll see what comments we get. Any comments that we get relative to your locality, I'll be sure to forward along if we need to discuss them. But ultimately, we will be coming back for final approval of the list here at the October meeting, and then sending along for the TPO board to do their approval at their October meeting as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Keith. So I guess just a couple of things that Dale said to mention, that she will be reaching out to us for a future LRTP meeting coming up soon. And then did this work out for everybody? Because I understand we can do 1 virtual meeting, two a year, but not 2 in a row. So did anybody have any problem getting here, parking? We're going to keep it as is for the next 2 months. Okay, throw it out there.
Just letting you know, we are working with the contractor, so the schedule, we'll keep you updated if there are any changes. But we definitely know the parking lot's not going to be available through December, but if any changes, we'll keep you posted.
Meeting adjourned.